If you had told me a year ago that a single sunflower would start the biggest neighborhood feud in the history of our block, I would have laughed. But the day Karen marched onto my lawn screaming that my plants were too tall, everything changed. And what started as a quiet little garden hobby turned into the most ridiculous, petty, and legendary revenge story my street has ever seen. It all began on a warm Saturday morning. I was out in my yard, humming, minding my business, and checking on my small row of sunflowers. They were maybe 3 feet tall, tiny compared to what they'd eventually become. That's when I heard the voice. You know that voice. Excuse me. Excuse me. Your plants are violating HOA guidelines. I turned around slowly, already knowing who it was before I even saw her sunglasses glinting like she was the sheriff of the sidewalk. Karen, the self-proclaimed assistant neighborhood coordinator, which basically means she likes to boss people around without actually having any real authority. She strutted up to the fence, arms crossed, lips pursed so tight they could cut diamonds. Your plants, she said, pointing dramatically, are growing too fast. They will block sightlines, attract insects, and could create shade. Yes, shade. The horror. I tried to be polite. Really, I did. I explained that sunflowers naturally grow tall, and there was plenty of space. But she wasn't having it. She jabbed a finger toward my garden and declared, "If those things get any taller, I'll make sure the HOA finds you. I'm warning you." And that's where she messed up, because something inside me snapped, not anger, not frustration, but something far more dangerous, petty determination. I smiled at her. A calm, polite smile that probably should have warned her what was coming. "Oh, don't worry, Karen," I said. "If you think these are tall now, just wait." She blinked, confused, but stomped away, muttering threats about community standards. Meanwhile, I went inside, sat at my dining table, opened my laptop, and began researching the tallest sunflower varieties on Earth. If she thought 3-foot plants were a problem, she had no idea what was about to happen. That I was going to grow a wall, an actual sunflower wall, 12 feet tall, stretching across the entire length of my property. A towering golden fortress visible from space, or at least from Karen's kitchen window, and that was only the beginning. The moment Karen stormed away, my mission became crystal clear. If she wanted to fight over plants, then I was going to grow the greatest botanical middle finger she'd ever seen. But this wasn't just about pettiness anymore. It became a challenge, me versus the limits of what a sunflower could do. And trust me, sunflowers can do a lot. Within an hour, I had a full-blown blueprint, seed varieties, growth rates, soil requirements, sunlight mapping. Everything short of hiring a sunflower personal trainer. My kitchen table looked like the command center of a gardening military operation. And at the top of my list, Titan sunflowers, known to grow up to 12 feet tall, perfect. The next morning, I headed to the garden store. The cashier watched me unload soil bags, fertilizer, compost, mulch, and 5 packets of Titan seeds like I was preparing for agricultural warfare. "Big project?" he asked. I just smiled. You could say that. Back home, I mapped out the perfect line along my fence, Karen's side of the fence, of course. The symbolism was beautiful. As I dug into the soil, I could already imagine her face when the first sprouts appeared. Pure confusion would soon evolve into disbelief, then outrage, then full meltdown. Days passed, and the tiny green shoots broke through the dirt like they were rising for battle. I watered them early in the morning, fed them the good fertilizer, even played classical music near them because someone online swore it helped plants grow. Did it work? Maybe. Did it make me feel like a sunflower dad? Absolutely. Every day they grew, faster than I expected. 6 inches, 10 inches, a foot. The stalks thickened into sturdy green columns. The leaves stretched out wide like they were flexing. By week 3, they were already taller than the original sunflowers that started the whole mess, and that's when Karen noticed. I was out front when I heard her gasp, an actual gasp, from the sidewalk. She stood frozen, eyes wide, one hand on her chest like she'd discovered a wild animal on her property. "Those weren't that tall before," she said, voice trembling with suspicion. "They're sunflowers," I replied, shrugging. "They grow." She narrowed her eyes. "You're doing this on purpose." "On purpose?" I repeated. "Karen, they're plants, not a conspiracy." But the twitch in her told me she didn't believe a word. She stormed away again, practically vibrating with anger. And as I watched the stalk stretch higher each day, I knew the real showdown was coming. By the time the sunflowers hit 7 feet, Karen had transformed from mildly annoyed neighbor to full-blown neighborhood detective. Every morning, without fail, she would step outside with a clipboard. Yes, a real clipboard, pretend to measure shadows, and mutter things like excessive foliage, unreasonable height, probable violations. She treated my garden like it was a crime scene. One afternoon, I caught her standing so close to the fence she might as well have been hugging it. She squinted up at the towering green stalks, scribbling notes. When she noticed me watching, she jumped like she'd been caught stealing apples. "I'm documenting this," she announced. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The HOA will be very interested," she said, waving her clipboard dramatically, as if it were a royal decree. "But here's the thing, we don't even have an HOA. Our neighborhood voted against one 5 years ago, but Karen insisted she was part of something she called the NPO, the Neighborhood Preservation Organization, which, after some digging, I discovered was literally just her and a Facebook page with 3 likes. Still, she wasn't backing down. 2 days later, she knocked on my door, looking like she had just rehearsed a speech in her bathroom mirror. "These plants," she began, "are creating a visual obstruction." "They're flowers, Karen." "They're a threat," she corrected. "To what?" "Airplanes." She ignored the sarcasm and instead shoved a paper into my hands, an official notice. It was printed on plain white paper, misspelled words everywhere, and included something she called a mandatory plant reduction order. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. "This isn't legal," I said. "It will be," she snapped. "You'll see." And then, she made her biggest mistake of all. She tried to sabotage the garden. That night, around 11 p.m., my motion lights flickered on. Curious, I peeked through the blinds, and there she was. Karen, in a bathrobe, with gardening shears, sneaking up to the fence like she was in a spy movie. Before she could even touch a leaf, I opened the back door. "Need help?" I called out. She screamed, actually screamed, dropped the shears, and sprinted back to her house like she'd seen a ghost. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. But that was the moment I knew this had escalated beyond irritation or petty arguments. This was now a full-on neighborhood war, and she intended to win it by any means necessary. Unfortunately for her, my sunflowers weren't done growing, and neither was my plan. By early July, the transformation was complete. What started as a harmless row of seedlings had become a solid wall of sunflowers, each one towering between 11 and 12 feet tall, stretching across my entire fence line like a bright golden fortress. Their giant yellow faces followed the sun each day, glowing like natural spotlights pointed directly at Karen's windows. Honestly, it was majestic. To me. To Karen. It was the apocalypse. I knew things were reaching critical levels when she came out wearing a sun hat the size of a UFO and a pair of noise-cancelling headphones to block the pollen hum, she claimed. The woman looked like she was training to survive a botanical disaster movie. Every time she passed the fence, she glared at the flowers like they owed her money. She stopped watering her own garden just so she could dedicate full attention to hating mine. Her daily routine basically became wake up, complain, glare, complain again, threaten legal action, and glare some more, and then came the meeting. She gathered 6 neighbors on her lawn and held what she called an emergency community conference. I watched from my porch as she paced around with a megaphone. Yes, another upgrade from the clipboard, ranting about how my sunflowers were destroying property values and interrupting the natural line-of-sight flow critical to neighborhood harmony. Most of the neighbors just looked confused. One kid even asked, "Are you sure you're not just jealous?" Karen nearly combusted on the spot. The next day, she marched over to my yard, fists balled at her sides, eyes wild with desperation. "This is out of control," she shouted, pointing at the sunflower wall towering above her like judgmental giants. "You did this to spite me." I calmly sipped my iced tea. "Karen, the plants are just doing what plants do. They are too tall. You said that at 3 feet. She sputtered. "Well, now they're monsters." I shrugged. Monsters with excellent posture. Her face turned 3 shades of red. She stormed away once again, but this time she wasn't defeated. Oh no. She was plotting something. I could feel it. But I didn't have to wait long. The following morning, I stepped outside to find Karen standing with a city inspector. An actual inspector, clipboard, badge, official uniform. For once, Karen had brought someone who wasn't imaginary. She pointed at my garden dramatically. See? I told you. It's a nuisance. The inspector frowned, studied the sunflowers, took some notes, and then looked at me. That's when he said something I will never forget. Enjoying these wild HOA and Karen stories? Hit subscribe for more real-life neighborhood drama. And drop a comment. What would you have done with a 12-foot sunflower wall?